Another Udyr buff? Someone on the balance team must really love this guy, huh? What is going on, summoners? Welcome back to ProGuides. I missed you all. How have all you guys been doing? Christoph here with another upcoming changes video. Like always, we're going to be running you guys through what is to come next patch. Well, the Worlds patch has already rolled out. Riot is making some final adjustments to make sure that the game is as balanced as possible for the rest of us grinding it out in solo queue. We've got a bunch of nerfs and buffs to go over, so make sure to stay tuned until the very end. But before we start, the end of the season is coming up, and you want to make sure you get into gold. You know where to go. Go to ProGuides.com and find a challenger coach to give you the strategies you need to get to gold. Get those skins, and then go flex on your friends. And as always, for our question of the day, what's your favorite little detail in League of Legends? Personally, I love it when Lucian has his interactions with Thresh. I thought that was pretty cute. He holds a ton of contempt, and I love how the champions are able to have these small exchanges with each other. Let me know your answers in the comments down below. With that being said, let's jump into the video. Beginning with the systems, we've got one change for you guys, and that's to Nimbus Cloak. Nimbus Cloak has proven time and time again to be far too powerful of a rune. Its tremendous popularity and versatility make it a hard rune to pass up compared to its competition, especially when some champions don't even use mana and Nullifying Orb is only useful against magic damage. Nimbus Cloak is clearly a solid default option for many. The movement speed buff is being changed from 10 to 30% based on level to 5 to 35% based on level. Also, the duration of the buff is being reduced from 2.5 seconds to 2 seconds. This is an overall nerf even in the late game where the movement speed was buffed. Chopping off a bit of the duration makes it weaker as a spell overall, but I'm certain players will still run it considering that its competition is very situational, while Nimbus Cloak's utility is something that'll always be useful. And with that being said, let's hop into the top lane. We've got one change to cover in the top lane, and that is to Camille. While she isn't nearly as dominant in mid to low elo, Camille is arguably one of the strongest high elo top laners at the moment. So much that she's actually been the most played champion in the top lane for several patches now. To help level the playing field for other top laners, she's receiving a nerf next patch to hit her scaling. Her attack speed bonus on E is being reduced from 40 to 80% based on ability level to 40 to 60% instead. That's actually it for the top lane, but we've got an extensive, and I mean very extensive list of jungle changes that we're going to be covering next. First is a nerf to Hecarim. He's been dominant ever since his buffs, and he looks almost untouchable right now. Especially in disorganized solo queue play, Hecarim players have been able to consistently find early leads and rampage throughout the rest of the game. It felt a little too easy to do this, and thus Hecarim is set to have his ease damage reduced next patch. The base damage is going down from 45 to 165 to 35 to 155. Also, its max base damage is being reduced from 90 to 330 to 70 to 310. Graves is also getting nerfed. The armor he receives on each stack of his E is being reduced from 8 to 20 to 6 to 18. He's an incredible duelist that scales really well. At the same time, he's felt a little bit too tough to take down in spite of how much damage he actually deals. While Graves should be tankier than the average marksman since he needs to get up close and personal, he's felt a little bit overpowering. This nerf should make it a little bit easier to actually take him out of the picture when you find a solid pick on him. Next up is another nerf. Nidalee's base damage is being reduced from 61 to 58. Considering that Nidalee's damage is primarily magic damage, we don't think this is a huge nerf to her combat power. Instead, this will hurt her jungle clear more than her duels. Nevertheless, 3 AD is a sizable amount to lose, especially in the early game where each point really does add up. For low elo and high elo players alike, this might be the small nerf that should make you reconsider playing her if you've always been on the fence. Trundle is finally receiving some buffs after underperforming for quite some time now. Tanks have been able to finally find some breathing room, but unfortunately for them, Trundle might be back after this buff. His passive healing is being changed. Rather than scaling up by percent intervals from 2 to 6 at specific levels, Trundle's passive will now heal for 2 to 7%, but scales smoothly with every level. To clarify, Trundle would basically gain 1% for every 4 levels on the healing, but now he'll gain a little portion of that percent at every level, meaning that this is a buff in every scenario. Also, his W's cooldown is being reduced from 15 flat to 15 to 11 based on ability level. Believe it or not, Lee Sin has been in need of a buff. Following several nerfs, he's actually been underperforming even in high elo. Thus, he's finally receiving a buff next patch to his AD per level. It's going up from 3.2 to 3.7. He'll end the game with 9 more AD than before, which isn't a small or big buff. It's kind of just right, I would say. Considering that we're set for some massive changes, wink wink, next season, I think it's okay to avoid giant changes as they could end up being problematic in the future. Alright guys, it's happening one more time. I alluded to this in the beginning of the video, but Udyr is getting yet another buff. Riot really wants to make this guy work. While a rework might be the better long-term solution, those take quite a bit of time and we're stuck with Udyr as he is right now. I'll give them a little bit of credit though, as they're taking the necessary measures to make sure that he can at least compete with the rest of the roster. Udyr's Phoenix Stance pulse damage is being increased from 40 to 240 to 50 to 300. This is a huge buff for Phoenix Stance Udyr, as it'll deal 60 more damage during its pulse. While it can be difficult to get off the full damage, the fact that you can potentially get 60 more damage for free is a huge buff. They basically got 60 damage for free, which can absolutely change the tide of fights, especially longer ones. Okay guys, that is it for the jungle, so let's head on to the mid lane. For the mid lane, we've got a single change, and that's coming to Corki. We'll consider him a mid laner because that's where he's found most success following his rework a while back. His Q's bonus AD ratio is being increased from 50% to 70%. Unfortunately, Corki hasn't been able to pack that bursty punch we were so used to seeing in the past. He's felt very weak for a long time, and he's finally getting some love. This buff should allow Corki to clear waves more effectively in the mid to late game, while also giving him some extra damage at all stages of the game. Considering that Corki doesn't build too much AD as he fits Trinity Force into one of his slots, this isn't the biggest buff. However, it's a buff nonetheless, and I'm sure any Corki player out there can appreciate any assistance. Alright, that was actually the only mid lane change we had, so let's hop into the bot lane next. Okay, so you guessed right when you clicked this video. Yes, Samira is getting a nerf. She's been OP since her release, and that much hasn't changed. This nerf by itself probably won't change that either, but it's definitely a start. I like the general idea behind this nerf, so let's talk about it. Her E's cooldown is being increased from 15 to 11 to 20 to 12. While the attack speed bonus is being reduced from 30 to 50% to 20 to 40%. First up, the attack speed nerf is a direct nerf to her and is well needed. She feels a bit too strong right now, and this should cut down her damage output a little bit. The fact that its cooldown is being increased is a cool nerf because it really plays to her feast or famine playstyle. Without a takedown, the cooldown will be much longer in the early game, and so it'll be much more important for Samira to get that reset. However, I really wish that they had nerfed the cooldown when maxed out a bit more. Only adding 1 second to it doesn't really feel like a big nerf, and I feel like it's more fitting if the cooldown was a bit longer to help her fit a snowball-y niche. The next marksman receiving a change is Aphelios, who is getting buffed. The lethality stat bonus he received is being increased from 2 to 12 to 3 to 18. Also, Calibrum's R mark damage is being increased from 20 to 70 to 40 to 100, while Gravitum's R root duration is going up from 1 to 1.25 seconds. While we're used to seeing Infernum ultimates take out entire teams in an instant, Aphelios' other guns have felt a little bit lackluster in comparison. Both Calibrum and Gravitum's ultimates are getting buffed here. The extra root duration should make Gravitum a much more appealing choice, as Aphelios can potentially lock down several enemies for a tad bit longer than before. Calibrum's buff should make it more viable of a choice when Aphelios needs some extra damage but doesn't have another weapon available to him. Alright guys, that covers the bot lane, so let's wrap things up with supports. First up is Pantheon support. Yes, so if you've been playing solo queue, you have been seeing this guy everywhere. We didn't really see Pantheon support coming. I mean, sure, you can make any character viable in any role, but how many of you guys thought that this guy would end up taking solo queue by storm? And guess what? Riot didn't even see this either, and Riot does not like it. Riot isn't having any of it, and they're nerfing him as a result. Pantheon's Q damage is being readjusted from 75 to 215 plus 100% of his bonus AD to 70 to 190 plus 115% of his bonus AD. His Q's Mortal Will bonus damage is also having its scaling change from 100 to 115% as well. Overall, this change is intended to make it so that support Pantheon will have lower base values to work with and thus deal less damage than before. If you're able to get enough gold, for example by playing him in a solo lane, you can build damage and take advantage of the increased AD ratios he's received. These should help level out the nerfs and leave him around the same power level as he currently is at, but only if you build enough attack damage. Thus, this pretty much only nerfs support Pantheon significantly, while solo lane Pantheon only loses out on just a little bit in the early game. Karma next is getting buffed this patch. Her passive and essentially her ultimate ability are receiving some big buffs next patch. The two work in conjunction with each other, so let's just say they're basically the same ability. Her passive simply acts to reduce the cooldown on her ultimate, Mantra Charge. When hitting enemies with spells, the cooldown reduction is being increased significantly. Rather than reducing the Mantra cooldown by 2, 3, or 4 seconds at levels 1, 7, and 13 respectively, it'll now reduce it by 2, 4, or 6 at levels 1, 6, and 11 respectively. However, the cooldown reduction off of basic attacks is being reduced from 1 to 2 based on level to 1 at all levels. Finally, her R's cooldown is being reduced from 45 to 36 to 40 to 34. Overall, the general direction of these changes is still a buff. It's pretty rare that you'll be able to basic attack repeatedly anyway, so the adjustments to the reduction from ability hits is a very nice buff for Karma. She's been underperforming ever since her last set of nerfs, and overall this buff should reward Karma players for landing their abilities. In cases where they repeatedly whiff, they'll probably still struggle quite a bit, but consistently landing abilities on the other hand should feel much more rewarding, as she'll have access to her mantra much more often. That covers all the changes we expect to see next patch. Thank you guys so much for watching. And again, if you like content like this, please hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate that. Once again, guys, it's been a pleasure updating you guys today, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. That's it for me. Good luck your next few games, and I'll see you on the Rift.